What's good? It's your boy Fanon. Finally, somebody steps up to the plate. And it's the Nevada State Athletic Commission. A report came out this evening that Canelo Alvarez has temporarily been suspended by the Nevada Commission for drug test failures. And this is an article out of the MMAfighting.com. Jose Camparelli. The huge, before I get into that, so people know who aren't familiar with the situation, Canelo Alvarez is supposed to be fighting Gennady Golovkin on Cinco de Mayo. And in the lead up to the bout, Canelo Alvarez tested positive for what was determined to be what was called, or referred to as trace amounts of Cambuterol, a performance-enhancing drug, a banned substance, and the WBA and the WBC both came out with statements, along with Golden Boy, that they believed that Canelo Alvarez was innocent and they were, going to allow the Gennady Golovkin-Canelo fight to continue, and that this was just something that had come from tainted meat in Mexico, and it was basically a mistake on Canelo Alvarez's part. But because he hadn't tested positive before, that they believed that he was honest in that. Now, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, however, is the state in which the fight would be put on. They, and I'll read the article, have temporarily suspended him for the time being, but I'll get into the article. Now, before I do that, though, I'm definitely going to, probably not this evening, but tomorrow for sure, going to have a live stream discussion about Canelo Alvarez, also some things that have been going on with Eddie Hearn, Jamal Charlo, Janie Jacobs, and the like. And the best way to know about that is to subscribe and hit the bell icon. If you hit the bell icon, then you'll know and you'll get notified exactly when we'll be having the live discussions, the real-time discussions. And we have a pretty mature channel, a good group of people that get together to talk about boxing, where you as long as you're polite and respectful, people are going to be polite and respectful to you, because that's kind of how we make sure we keep the chat. You don't have to worry about a lot of people calling you out of your name and really dogging you out for your opinions. The motto for the live chat is, give respect, get respect. And it's a very, very good and positive. We try to make it a positive experience for everybody that's in there. Troll-free zone, 100%. So with that said, hit the bell icon so you can participate in that. And let me get to the meat of the article. Canelo Alvarez temporarily suspended by the Nevada Commission for drug test failures. The huge planned boxing match between Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin could be in serious jeopardy. Alvarez was temporarily suspended by the Nevada State Athletic Commission on Friday for his drug test failures for the banned substance Cambuterol. NAC Executive Director Bob Bennett told MMA Fighting on Friday. The Los Angeles Times was the first to report the news. Alvarez will have to go before the commission for a disciplinary hearing on April 10th. He is scheduled to face Gennady Golovkin on May 5th at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, but the temporary suspension puts the fight in doubt. The NAC did not suspend Alvarez immediately, but the commission had been investigating the case since March 5th, when news came out that Alvarez had failed a drug test for Cambuterol. The samples, which ended up positive, were collected February 17th and February 20th, Bennett said. At the time, Alvarez's promoter, Golden Boy, said that it was a small trace of the drug in Alvarez's system, consistent with meat contamination that has impacted dozens of athletes in Mexico over the last few years. The out of competition drug testing was administered by the voluntary anti-doping agency VADA, and the sample was analyzed by the WADA accredited SMRTL lab in Salt Lake City, Utah. Meat in Mexico and China being tainted with Cambuterol is a legitimate occurrence, and there has been a World Anti-Doping Agency WADA alert about the issue for years. multiple UFC fighters, including Mexico's natives Brandon Moreno and Augusto Montano, had been cleared of sanctions by the by USADA, the UFC's or USADA, the UFC's anti-doping partner, after they were found to have slight traces of clenbuterol in their systems consistent with meat contamination. However, the NAC has suspended fighters for testing positive for clenbuterol in the past. Alvarez has denied knowingly doping. Golden Boy said Alvarez would move his camp from Mexico to the United States and take any further tests that VADA deems necessary, leading up to the scheduled bout for Golovkin. I'm an athlete who respects the sport, and this surprises me and bothers me because it had never happened to me, Alvarez said in a statement earlier this month. I will submit to all the tests that require me to clarify this embarrassing situation, and I trust at the end the truth will prevail. Now, this is honestly for me, and I want to say shout out to there's a subscriber that sent me some emails and some videos about clenbuterol, and which basically talked about the what was the guy's name? Well, basically, it's a bunch of information from doctors that talked about what the amount of clenbuterol that had to be in your system, and below a certain amount of, below a certain amount was consistent with trace amounts, and how much you had to have in your system in order to be, for you to have got any benefit from it. And that's Christian, CIDDCAST. I always just call you Christian in the live streams. So I know, shout out to you, man, for sending me those articles. I really do appreciate them. And it was very illustrative in the fact that, in explaining the fact, and it was Victor Conti, it was several other doctors who were involved in, who were experts in the subject, talking about the amount of clenbuterol that needed to be in your system in order for you to get a benefit from it. And whether or not, certain things, I think it was like Fernando Vargas, or no, excuse me, Fernando Vargas, another Mexican boxer that talked about how he had tested positive for it, and he was, really shocked about it and all that. So for the sake of this video, I don't know whether or not Canelo Alvarez tested whether or not he was using clenbuterol in a way that would, purposely to get a competitive advantage, right? I don't know that. And I will, just for the sake of, this discussion, I will say, okay, let's just assume that he ingested the meat without purpose, right? Just he didn't know, or, he had somebody that was working, his chef, just ran out of beef. And although he usually gets it shipped in, the chef tried to, hit a shortcut on him and went down to the store, and got some beef from somewhere that people were testing positive, where the meat was tainted with clenbuterol. And Canelo Alvarez didn't have any idea that he was doing that, and that's what led to the test. Now, just assuming that that's the situation, the Nevada State Athletic Commission has still taken the right move in suspending, or temporarily suspending, Canelo Alvarez until they can have a hearing. And I suspect in the hearing that they're going to ask people to show up with the proof, the receipts, the receipts for the meat that was bought, the test results, experts testifying on, what amount it was, and, did they test anybody else that ate meat from the same, that was purchased at the same market, or cooked at the same restaurant, right? Whatever it was it his aunt that came by the house, and his aunt gave him some food, and he didn't really, he didn't think about it, and he didn't want to insult his aunt, so he went on ahead and ate the meat, ate, and it could have, whatever the case is. It's the right thing for the commission to do the investigation and do a thorough investigation to make sure that this isn't a case of Canelo Alvarez using the fact that other people have tested positive for Albuterol as, as an excuse to get away with him trying to cheat the system. And the thing that bothered me when the announcement was made by the WBC and the WBA and Golden Boy and the way that they went about, explaining the situation or notifying people that this had happened, was that they already pretty much that the boxing commissions determined that he was innocent in a time frame for me that didn't allow me to be very confident that they had done a significant amount of research. Now, even in the case that the commission says, well, we do understand that this was an accident and we do believe your story. Everything checks out. We can see where you bought the meat from. We know what happened, right? We believe everything that you guys said. This story completely pans out for us, and we believe everything you have to say. Still, Canelo Alvarez should face some type of penalty for this, because that is not an excuse that can be used by somebody else outside of Mexico. It's a scenario where he has some amount of contributory negligence at the least in allowing this to happen. Canelo Alvarez is a professional athlete, a professional Mexican athlete. He understands and knows full well, because I knew before this fight had happened that there had been issues with fighters from Mexico testing positive for substances that were banned, right, or on the banned list, and them having said it was because of the meat that they ate. It just happened in the latter part of 2017 with Luis Nery before he went in. Actually, the test wound up coming out after he had fought in Shinsuke Yamanaka, and he wound up being able to fight in the rematch and winds up missing weight, right? Grossly missing weight, and knocking out Yamanaka, and wind up where the fact was we wind up just cheating twice. Now, I think in the case of Luis Nery, it might have been something other than Albuterol. Somebody in the comment section can check me, but at the same, this is enough. Performance enhancing drugs is enough of a problem in boxing and in sports in general, where the sanctioning bodies need to be very, very thorough in their investigation. And if it winds up that Canelo Alvarez is completely innocent, well, he can't be completely innocent because he tested positive. But if it winds up being the fact that that everything that he says about it being tainted meat can be backed up by the testimony of witnesses, receipts from the place that it was he bought it from, they able to find a few other people that ate meat in the same place and tested them, right? Recently tested them. If all of that happens, then the fight should be able to continue, because he did violate the rules. I mean, he did test positive, which means he violated the rules, because the rules, though I've not read them, I do believe you cannot test positive for these type of drugs. It's not whether or not you intended to cheat the system. It's whether you did cheat the system or not. Then I could see the fight going on, but the good thing about this is that the Nevada State Athletic Commission did something that signals to other boxers that if you get caught in this situation, you're not too big. You're not too big. Not too much money is on the line. The fight is not that serious, or that money is not that much. Doesn't come into play so much that we're willing just to completely turn our back on the rules and the regulations of boxing and fighters' safety to allow this to go on. And if we'll hold Canelo Alvarez accountable and make him come and explain in a fair hearing, I don't have a problem with a fair hearing. I don't have a problem with a fair hearing. I don't necessarily think that just because, if it's something where there's some type of issue that people are aware of and it winds up hitting him, that just means off the bat that, that he's going to be suspended for 2 years, that he's not going to be able to, train for the fight, or, that he's not going to be able to earn a living or anything like that. I do believe that they should have some type of ability to appeal, right, to tell their side of the story. But the way that the WBA and the WBC originally went about it, the same, because, and I'm sorry for being repetitive, but there's 3 bodies involved here. There's a WBC, there's a WBA, and there's the Nevada State Athletic Commission. The WBC could have suspended him. The WBA could have suspended him. And the Nevada State Athletic Commission can suspend him. The person that is the WBC is the one that owns the title belt. The WBA owns another title belt. The Nevada State Athletic Commission is the one that allows him to put on his bouts, to put on his fights in Las Vegas. So as far as this fight going off, the biggest and most important entity in this is Nevada State Athletic Commission. The WBC, in my opinion, didn't just drop the ball, they just passed the ball. And I thought it had something to do with the fact that he agreed to fight for the belt. Like, hey, before Canelo Alvarez wasn't fighting for the belt, he tests positive, or the positives come in on whatever, what do they say, the 17th and the 21st, something like that. But whatever, 10 days later, after he takes that positive test, he agrees, the WBC announces that Canelo Alvarez is going to be fighting for the WBC belt, and they've been willing to put whatever type of issues they have to the side, and, they're one big happy family. So the WBC allows him to fight. The WBA, who suspended Luis Ortiz for a test that the WBC cut him a break from, suspends Luis Ortiz and takes away his mandatory position for the WBA belt off of a test that was forgiven by the WBC. But yet they allow, and by the way, Luis Ortiz also had a doctor's excuse because the medicine was for high blood pressure, and he had documentation to prove that he had high blood pressure. Now, some other people mentioned the fact that the high blood pressure itself might have been, related to prior use of performance-enhancing drugs. I can't speak on that because that's outside of the scope of this video. But within the scope of the video is the fact that the WBA punished Luis Ortiz for something his doctor had an excuse for, conveniently allowing taking away Luis Ortiz's WBA number 1 ranking and mandatory position for Anthony Joshua. So it was shady on the WBC side. It was shady on the WBA side. And now that the Nevada State Athletic Commission sounds like, it is at the very least going to do what it needs. At least care. I can't say what's going to happen in the investigation, right? Who knows? It could be a situation where they just know they're under a lot of political pressure, and they say, okay, well, look, we can't just let this fly. There's too much pressure out there. You've got Gennady Golovkin screaming that the guy's a dirty cheater. You've got Abel Sanchez complaining about it. By the way, though, Gennady Golovkin is screaming that he's a cheater while he still wants to take the fight, right? Ain't nobody forcing Gennady Golovkin to fight. He could have just walked away from the fight. But, hey, man, he decides not to because it's not a mandatory. It's a voluntary for the WBA, the WBC, and the IBF. None of this is a mandatory fight for him. But, hey, maybe that's the case and why the Nevada State Athletic Commission decided that they were going to go ahead and do this. But it's the right move. And at this point in time, as far as the investigation for the Nevada State Athletic Commission, the temporary suspension, I would hope that at the very least with a guy as much money as this guy has, to watch his P's and Q's, that, at the very least, they fine him. But at the same time, if it winds up that it all pans out, still some type of message has to be sent to people that are fighters in Mexico, so they know that they can't just use this as some masking agent. And if they don't have the money to defend themselves, like Canelo Alvarez is, you know how it is. If you got the money for the lawyers, for the investigators, for all that stuff, you got a better chance than just Joe Blow, $50,000, $10,000 or $5,000 a fight guy, right? But if it's those guys, they're going to get suspended. So, anyway, we'll see what it is. It is what it is, and update you as it moves on. Peace.